gotten around that is all our recordings are either made by us or we acquire record companies instead of individual, scholars who come in with a collection, because that way we know we can get the copyrights. So we actually, all our recordings, we own the copyrights to, which means we can use them all the time for things. And we're also really concerned that money gets back to the original communities, because a lot of times the collector was the person who got the royalties on a lot of these earlier records. We want to make sure that the music comes back to the original communities. And what happens is, you get a lot of these communities where, sending them a check is not really going to be very helpful. That's not really how they, how they live. So it's a tricky thing to do, because I know Tony one time, we tried with royalties from one of the records he did with the Suya Indians in Brazil. He bought a small canoe for the people of this village. I thought it'd be really helpful to move things back and forth up and down the river. And it fell into the hands of the main guy in town. And of course, that changed his status in the community. So he inadvertently caused issues. So we were always trying to figure out, how do we get something back to the people who made this? And then, of course, for them, what we think of as copyright is not necessarily true, right? In some places, the music belongs to the ancestors, or it might belong to, certain communities, only men can supposedly be able to listen to these songs. Or there's all these kind of other issues you have to take into account that we have to try to figure out. It's a tricky thing. So we're also, too, looking to try to, find what are holes in our collection. Do we have everything? The range there. There's some place So Dan Sheehy, who ran the label for a few years, noticed that South American recordings are real weak in our collection. So he got a bunch of grant money, and we made a lot of South American recordings. But yeah, again, when I talk about, we have the website, which I'm not going to bring up right now, but if you go to the Smithsonian Folkways website, there's lesson plans. There's if we go out and record a new recording right now in South America, we send our sound engineer and then the person who's producing it, and we usually rent out a studio in, say, Venezuela. And what happens then is the musicians are brought into a controlled environment and recorded, good equipment. But then they usually go out to the people's community too and do like oral histories and interviews and videos. And we put all those videos up on the website, so when you go on to listen to this recording, there's more of a full experience. You actually can sit and listen to the musician talking about, how his instrument, or when he learned it, or when she learned it. I guess it's to get the stuff out and to put the music into context, because it's something that I struggle with when, like for instance, my son who's 21, I don't think he's played a CD in his life. Everything is on his iPod, right? So if he has like a Navajo deer dance, all of a sudden it might just say deer dance on his iPod, but there's nothing, liner notes, no context, nothing to say, okay, what tribe is this? Why, what part of their lives is this deer dance from? All of that is missing. And so I think it's something that we're real concerned about is to provide the context, to write the booklets, to hire the scholars and all these different kind of music to write about what is this stuff. And we also make all the liner notes available for free on our website. You can just go and every one of the 4,000 or so records up there, just hit a button and download it or bring it up. So that's just really key. We've also gotten a thing where we have things like a company called Alexander Street Press, and it's a direction we're trying to go towards, where they can actually subscribe to like the entire collection, all the booklets, everything, have it there, and all the audio for streaming for universities or schools. So if you were in a university and you had a subscription, any one of the students could go into the library and listen to the whole thing. So I know the current director, Halb Skippers, who just came on, is hoping someday we can get an endowment and make it so that all schools will get that free. And we just have it out everywhere for people to use. The record business, as we knew it. Anyway, the record business nowadays, to give you some sense, is tanked. I mean, you can't, I was cleaning out some CDs at home. I took a box of free CDs into my office, and all the younger people working there, nobody touched them. They weren't interested. Right now, our CD sales are so low that you can't possibly make money off, creating a new CD. So what do you do? Right now, the current model is a streaming thing. So Spotify pays you about something like 0.003 of a cent per So you could actually sell 1 million records and still not make that much money. That's no future. You can't keep, because for the record label, a lot of it is the people who work there are paid by selling recordings. If they don't sell anything, if you're being paid 1/1000th of a cent, a lot of people are going to lose their jobs. None of these things will be created. So we're trying to experiment with a membership thing now, like public radio stations in the United States do that, where you can actually pay $25 a year and you get to support the station. And we're hoping these members, well, actually the members will get like benefits. They can actually download a certain, like 1,000 tracks, things like that. So, that gives us a little bit of money. So we're struggling with that. So how do we create the kinds of things we do in the future is the next big thing. But looking back, we have, I'll show you a picture of it a little later. We have a thing called a microtech machine, which is it's like a robot. Two of them are robotic systems. They're robots that create CDs one at a time for anybody who wants it. So if you want some totally obscure recording from 1951 somewhere and you need it, the robot will go, take its arm, take a blank CD, pop it in a drawer, burn the music on there, burns a PDF of the booklet on there, goes over, labels a CD. It spits out a little sticker that makes it looks like the original LP cover. You stick it on a cardboard CD-sized sleeve, and you send it to the person. So the 40,000, it's 40,000 tracks, so 4,000 albums. And if you look at, we sell a lot of those. It could be schools, it could be people who want them. It's like 1s and 2s and 3s across thousands of titles. So I guess it's kind of the niche we're trying. It's a thing also we use to try to acquire other, extinct record companies. Because now, obviously, right now, a lot of these older companies, they're real niche kind of companies. They're not going to survive because they can't sell CDs, and they're not really in a position to do kinds of things we're doing. So we're trying to get them to donate, or we get like a little bit of money by raising it, get a philanthropist and put some money into it to acquire some of these labels so we can keep their music alive, these people's life's work. Went out and put out these labels, some of whom actually did the recordings themselves, some were just the record companies. So right now we also, the other half of the thing, which is dear to my heart, is the archive. So we actually have a reading room, and we have about 10,000 vinyl LPs on a wall, which I consider those, they're not unique. I mean, the Library of Congress down the street has them all, and they're preserving them. They're for people to listen to. People who want to put together a lesson plan or something can come in and into the archive and actually use them. So we also have a very large room full of recordings. This looks like most people know this from archives. All the boxes on the left are all oral histories with Folklife people done over the last however many years, mainly on cassette. And I would say we probably have digitized probably less than 20% of this archive. So right now I'm more worried about not the commercial 78s, the shellacs on the left, which presumably there's more than one in the world of some of this stuff. It's the ones that are once-only things by people who are no longer alive on the right. It's the stuff we want to go for. Here's the robot, one of the robots that makes the CDs. So we actually one time got somebody gave us a tape of Louis Armstrong's last recording he ever made, with the rights. And so we made it available, and it somehow got announced on the nightly news, and we sold 5,000 of them. So the two robots were cranking for like pretty much a week, 24 hours a day. That's another nice thing, because somebody orders something at like 3 in the morning or something, and they put their credit card in, the thing will have it ready the next morning. People can get it in like 24 hours. So again, and this stuff is, you can get downloads. So again, for people who want to analyze the digital content, people in this room, it's there, and we're working towards, digitizing the rest. So we're hearing about digitization projects earlier. What we've been doing is some good, I guess, do's and don'ts. The first thing we did in the 90s, unfortunately, was I digitized a lot of we have about 5,000 acetates, including some amazing stuff, all the original recordings of Woody Guthrie, Leadbelly, Pete Seeger, Coleman Hawkins, Lester Young, Mary Lou Williams, all these people. And I spent a lot of time getting them all digitized to digital audio tape. Bad move. So we eventually managed to copy a lot of those, but a lot of those things we've redone now. But we have, I think, 4 different rooms with a couple of these good Technics turntables Getting back, we actually have a kit we've bought a couple times, which has like 5, 6 different needles in them, more sizes than that. And how we do it is, how I did it, and these masters I work with, is that it was a trial and error thing. You know, it's like they ride in different depths in the groove, and some will get more signal, some will get more noise. So I did the same thing with a lot of these amazing things, like the original Woody Guthrie things. I sometimes would make 2 or 3 different copies of that recording when I digitized it with different needles, and they'd sound different, and you never know. Because over the time, 20 years from now, there's going to be better software to take care of this stuff, and you don't want to like have made a decision that's gotten rid of anything. So they're all going in. We also use WaveLab. It's going into the computer, and the main thing we have about maybe 50 or 60,000 reel-to-reel tapes, going back to some of the earliest ones, 1948 lead-belly tapes. And weirdly enough, with reel-to-reel tape, the stuff from the late 70s and early 80s has not aged well. It's the worst shaped stuff, where I can actually play stuff from 1953 that sounds perfect. It has to do with the chemistry of the binders. So the 80s tapes have now, all the stickiness inside has now come out to the surface. So effectively your Scotch tape is now Scotch tape. So it won't even play on the machine. It just sticks totally. But we also use, in the convection oven for baking tapes, that's a thing where you can actually, those sticky shed tapes like that, you can actually heat them up for a period of time. And in most cases, you can actually get them to be playable again temporarily. We're about ready to try to digitize about 4,000 sticky tape things with a grant. So like we were hearing before, we also use interns, student interns, or people who are like in school learning audio engineering to help. We also, as far as metadata, we tend to use terms that are like from like the U.S. Library of Congress has subject terms that, when usually that's what we try to put in there. They don't have much in the way of musical instruments around the world, so sometimes I'll go to a Grove dictionary, but we try to use standardized terms for things, so not every person putting in an instrument. I think I saw an earlier presentation where there was like an African instrument, there was like 12 different spellings of it or something, so you don't have to deal with all of that in there. There's a thing this guy developed called BWF Meta Edit, which actually, it's a software, I think you can get it free online, that allows you to use that to actually embed the metadata into the actual audio itself. In so all cases, we're doing that. Smithsonian has a giant thing called SIRIS, which is a giant database you can search for anything in the Smithsonian. And the hope, it's being migrated to a new system now, but eventually the hope is you can go on there and search what you're looking for, and actually in the cases where we can allow the public to, we probably are not going to put stuff up we're selling right now for free, but other things, our oral histories and things like that from the archive have that, so you can actually at some point click on that record and there'll be a little field and you click and you can actually stream the whole thing. So that's kind of the direction we're going. I guess the last thing to say more or less is, for questions is, I think the one thing that, for the future, like I say, the record business, we don't know what we're going to do. Is that if we're collecting new stuff, I keep saying this to people, there's a lot of, it's good to hear about people collecting, Cameroonian hip hop and things like that, because I know that a lot of the archives in the United States are like, it's like they have to wait 30 years after music has been developed and collected from somebody who actually collected it. So these private collectors end up being really key. That's happening with punk rock right now with some of the archives. They're going back to 1980s, people who collected everything about punk rock, and you have to go to those people to get it, whereas no one thought about that it was important enough right now to collect it. And I'm sure there's a million things out there like that. That's all I can say, that all of us, who are collecting music should be like looking around what's around you right now. But I think I'll conclude with that and go questions. Yeah.
Questions?
Well, what was your motivation to go into that field? I mean, if you look at the young people today, they say, well, why would we collect anything? We get all on YouTube, so there is anything collected. but in your days there was. But what was your motivation to
Me
go
personally?
Yes, yeah.
I was this weird guy who was on college radio, and I had all my music on reel-to-reel tapes in the early 1970s. Carried my reel-to-reel deck around for recording rock music.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. Ran a record shop for a while. And eventually, once I got my master's, in sound archives, I didn't know where. Thought I might be just like working in a library around the middle of nowhere, a public library. I didn't know this existed, but somehow managed to work my way into that, and then fell in with people like Tony Seeger and some of the people before us. Like, I never met Moses Asch, but Ralph Rinzler, who was a guy at the Smithsonian who went out collecting American music. Kind of fell in with them, and they were my mentors, and they taught me that, hey, this whole world exists. It's just totally cool.
Mm. And about this, the question about the future of archives. I mean, isn't it true that if you can find today's music on the internet and YouTube, and you got all the metadata, if you go to the net, you get at everything. Does it make sense to collect today's music?
That's a good question. Everybody's putting it up. I think there's pop stuff, but I think there's probably going to be types of things that are not going to be. People aren't going to be putting that on YouTube. Other types of music, I don't know.
Yeah, you mean?
I don't know. There's so many people who've traveled the world. If you go to what's happening right now in different parts of the world, it's everybody putting it up on YouTube.
Yeah, of course. Well,
Okay.
I'm in Southeast Asia, and I know lots of people who just do their music, and so. But the question for young people, the future of your discipline of archiving. Do you find young people wanting to go into your direction?
Yes, we have lots of interns coming in.
Okay.
Lots of interns. And I get lots of young musicians from all over the world, bands, who are playing alternate kind of musics and things. Who there was a guy named Sonny Jane who came through recently. He's from India and does sort of Indian hip hop. Yeah, and he was interested. He has a band called Red Barat, and he just wanted to know what we do. He was just fascinated by all this old stuff. He loved sitting in these rooms, walking in that room and seeing what they were doing. I think we were talking about some of the things on YouTube. I was just thinking, all those cassette boxes you saw right there, those are all oral histories people can be recording with current musicians. That that stuff's probably not going to be on YouTube, and people would know what questions to ask and to chronicle it. So that stuff definitely should be happening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Huh?
Good. Thank you so much.
Sure.